Welcome back.
Hi, Chief.
Hello, tribe. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we have such a task before us. Not just covering 3,000 years of history in an hour, and I think that comes to about 200 years a minute. But how do we do what we need to do today? If you have been here the last few weeks, you know that we have been dwelling in a different world. A world of circular time, not linear time, right? Creation, one life, one existence of the universe, and then the fireworks, as my grandma used to say, right? But reincarnation, right? The cycle of the seasons, the cycle of life, death, rebirth, life, death, rebirth, right? And now we have to make a huge cosmic shift, if you will, for the next 3 weeks. We have also talked about living in the midst of the divine. And now we need to talk about those separate circles, right? The divine above us, in some sense separate from us, more powerful than we, right? And we need to get back to that divine. I think in this Western context we can begin to use the G word, which can stand for either God or Gandalf, if you will, right? That's a huge break. That's another shift that you'll see in the next 3 weeks. We have talked some about religious scriptures, but not a lot. And now, beginning with Judaism and the three great religions of the book, as the Western religions are known, right? Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. From the get-go, we need to talk scriptures, because Western religion is scripturally based. And for many, their religious book is absolutely sacred. In fact, I come from a religious background in which I was taught that the scriptures are absolutely error-free. Right? I saw a bumper sticker once that fits this. God said it, I believe it, that settles it. Oh, how I long for that simplicity. If only, right? Well, let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can unpack, okay? There's another thing that we need to do today, too. And we'll be doing for the next 2 weeks, but especially today. Have I mentioned a single historical date in all of these weeks? Can you think of one? No. Well, now we're stepping into the world of history, at least history as you and I know it, right? That's not to say we are entirely, as you will see, leaving the world of myth. But there's an emphasis, particularly in Judaism, on history. And history for the Jews is a story. Their very identity is based on their story. Now, one thing you might notice in the next few weeks, I assume that most of us, if not all of us, are from Western traditions, right? Whether or not you happen to be religious personally, if you have been raised, particularly in this country, right, you have been influenced, if you will, by, I would suggest, a particular religious tradition especially. There are some who claim that the United States is a Christian country. That's, at the very least, a problematic assertion. But in many ways, I think it is true. Culturally, at the very least, right? Culturally, at the very least. Now, here's where a problem might come in if you are from a tradition other than Judaism. If you're like me and you did grow up in a church, you have heard a version of Judaism. It's important to realize that that version of Judaism is not necessarily the Jewish one, right? It is a Christian version of Judaism. And it's important to realize that as we go through. This is where the study of religion can be especially tough, right? When you get closer to home, right, you're going to have some assumptions, perhaps even what you feel to be accurate information that you will need to analyze, right, that you will need to rethink and perhaps revise. And that can be difficult. Religion, as many of you know, is a very personal matter. It certainly can be. And that can be difficult, okay? But work with me. Let's see what we can find out about Judaism. Let's see if we can allow Judaism to tell its own story today. I'm going to do my best to let that happen, okay? So let's start with the Jewish scriptures. Would you do me a favor from now on and never, ever in the presence of someone who is Jewish refer to their scriptures as the Old Testament? Do you understand why I say that? For them, it is not the Old Testament. If anything, it is the Testament, okay? It's the Christians who take over the Jewish scriptures, name them their Old Testament, once they add what? The New Testament, right? I just want to make sure we're all aware of that, okay? Well, the Jewish scriptures are divided into three sections. The first of those three sections is called the Torah, T-O-R-A-H. Torah can also be used for the Jewish scriptures more generally speaking. Technically speaking, it refers to this first section, the first 5 books of the Jewish scriptures, the Torah. Can anyone name those books? Okay, either you're Jewish or you paid attention in Sunday school, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Who is said to have written, and notice the way I put that, who is said to have written those first 5 books? Moses. Here we go. Did Moses write the first 5 books of the Jewish scriptures? Well, it's important to realize that he dies before the end of the 5th one, so I think it would be difficult at best for him to have written those books. Here's the question we need to ask. Why would it be important for a people, right, to attribute their scriptures, or certainly an important portion of them, to someone who is as well known as Moses? What might they get from that? Validity, right? Authority. Okay, I think that is what is happening here. Is it some kind of plagiarism, or do we use current moral strictures to place on this decision? No. In the historical context, that is simply what was done. Do we even know for sure, to step outside the religious sphere for a moment, that Socrates ever lived? Socrates, one of the most famous philosophers ever, right? We really have nothing directly from him. What we have are stories about him, for instance, in the writings of Plato, right? And I think it's the same kind of thing, to attribute these books to someone who is famous. We're going to encounter the same situation when we come to Christianity, if we have time, I would like to go into more detail about the Christian scriptures, particularly the Gospels, because that happens to be one area of religious studies with which I am much more familiar. The Torah, okay, it's also known as the Pentateuch. Pentateuch, Tuch meaning book, right? Penta, what does Penta mean? As in the Pentagon, right? The 5-sided building up there in Washington, D.C. The second section is known as the prophets. Here's where spelling is important. That's not P-R-O-F-I-T-S, okay? That is a different kind of prophets, okay? This is P-R-O-P-H-E-T-S. We use this term in our common language, right? When you say that someone is a prophet or that someone prophesies, what are you saying about them? Speaking of the future. They're foretelling the future, okay? That is one meaning of the term prophet. One of the things that's important to point out is that for Christians, the future predicting role of the prophets is extremely important, okay? We haven't gotten to Christianity yet. It hasn't yet been invented, okay? So we need to bracket that for a week at least. Well, no. Yeah, for a week, okay? We skipped the week after Christianity. Appropriately enough, it seems, for Easter Monday. In a Jewish context, when you read the prophets in their historical day, right, it is not so much that they were, I mean, if you ask a Jew, of course they were not predicting the coming of Jesus, because the Jews do not agree that Jesus is the divine Son of God and the Messiah, right? For them, the prophets may be speaking about the future, but they are speaking about the immediate future. Not the distant future, but the immediate future. In fact, that they are doing what wise men and women have always done. They are looking at the culture around them. And what they are saying is, if you do right, you will be blessed. But if you do wrong, and oftentimes these prophets are pointing out wrong, right? If you keep doing, and I would suggest the United States might learn something here. If you keep doing what you are doing, if you continue to mistreat the poor, if you do not take care of them, if you do not take care of the stranger in your midst, there will be judgment. There will be judgment, right? That is what they are doing, it seems to me, right? And I want us to be sure that we understand that, right? Not that they are talking about a distant future, but about a more or less immediate future. And then we have this third section called the writings, appropriately enough, right? The writings. And it's kind of a catch-all, if you will. Different forms of literature, different books. And honestly, in my humble opinion, some of the most beautiful words ever written, right? I mean, the book of Psalms, in and of itself, right? A collection of songs, a hymnal, if you will, used in worship. Poetry, right? Poetry. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Phew. Just beautiful. Proverbs, such wisdom in Proverbs. The book of Lamentations, which it might as well be one long blues song, right? Oh, just beautiful writings and such wisdom, such wisdom. Now, it's interesting, if I may step forward for just a moment. Do any of you recall in the Gospels when Jesus, who was not a Christian, right? He was a Jew, okay, read the Jewish scriptures, right? When he referred to his scriptures and his people's scriptures, what did he call them? The law and the prophets, right? The law and, well, he got 2 out of 3. The law and, why doesn't he mention the writings? Oh, this is important. This is important. This book and none of these books of Scripture dropped out of the sky whole. They come from somewhere, right? And we usually have an image that somebody sat down and wrote out a book, right? I remember in Tabernacle Baptist Church, one of those stained glass windows, right? I think it was St. Matthew, who is dressed in medieval garb, using a quill pen, right? With an angel standing over his shoulder, guiding his hand, right? Which is to say, this is not just any book, right? Inspired by God, okay?